So last week we took a trip into the heart of Andalusia to Granada with Bromptons and long distance trains to get a taste of Spain's Andalusian region. In this video, we're going to give you tips on what to expect and what you should check out if you do a bike and train trip to Granada. First off, big thanks to Clever Cycles, who helped make this video possible by refurbing and outfitting our Bromptons to explore Spain by train and bike. If you're in the US and are thinking about getting a Brompton or want to mod yours for travel, definitely give Clever Cycles in Portland a visit. So first off, let's talk about the whole Brompton and train thing, what we took, what were the special bike requirements.
Yeah, so from Girona to Granada, we took the AVE, which is one of the high-speed trains run by Renfe. And it went through Madrid, and then we had to change trains in Madrid. So it was roughly, 3.5 hours, and then a little bit of a layover, and then another 3.5 hours.
One of the interesting things when you take a high-speed train that you don't experience when you're taking like just a metro or local train is that there is security check-in. So, and it seems to vary from station to station. When we were boarding in the Girona station, it was a little bit more relaxed. We could just roll our bikes through without putting it through the big scanner. But in Madrid, it was a whole different story.
Yeah, and I think it probably depends on whether you're going through a small train station or a bigger one. I would expect Madrid to be a little bit touchier about these kinds of things. Barcelona too, probably. Granada was fairly simple, especially at 6 in the morning. So you kind of just have to go and figure it out and just be prepared for any combination of things. So the nice thing about Bromptons is that pretty much all the high-speed trains here in Spain will allow you to take a folding bike without any extra fees or anything like that. You just have to bag it. Bromptons, I think, are the easiest to take on board, but all folding bikes count as long as they fit within a certain size requirement. So we just packed ours, folded them down, packed them into the IKEA Dimpa bags, carried them on board, put them in the luggage hold.
And generally this worked pretty well, but there was an instance where they were boarding 2 trains on one track and we had to walk a football field with a backpack, the heavy Brompton bag, and the heavy Brompton in one arm. So that's something you should prepare for. There might be a bit of a hike. By the end of the trip, I had stopped putting my Brompton completely in the bag and just put it over the bike so I could roll it pretty easily to the train cars.
And I think here in Spain, they're generally pretty relaxed about it as long as your bike is more or less obscured in some fashion. So it's not getting other people's luggage dirty, or I don't know what it is that they want you to cover it for. One thing to be aware of is that depending on which car you're on, the luggage holds, the size, the location, it all kind of varies by train set, by how old or new the train is, by which car you're on. So just be prepared, get there as early as you can, try and be one of the first people on, and just be prepared to maybe have to put it in a different car or the other end of the car from what you were expecting.
When we finally got on the train, it was in total a 10-hour journey, 6 hours on the train, and we had to lay over in Madrid for a couple hours, so we had to kill some time. So definitely a bit of a trek. When we got in, it was fairly late at night. It was cold, so we decided to fold up the Bromptons and take a taxi to where we stayed. So let's talk about lodging. We ended up staying at a super cute, bike-friendly short-term rental. It's actually run by a super bike-friendly couple, and they're building out a rental fleet of Ritchie gravel bikes, so that was pretty sweet. You can, of course, stay in town. This lodging property was just on the east side of town. So what this meant is that it was a little bit of a trek getting in. We ended up taking the bus pretty often to get into downtown. But it meant, in terms of riding, it was a lot easier to get out of the city and into the beautiful mountains around us.
But lest you think we were out in the boonies outside of the city, that's not the case. It was in a neighborhood, the Lancha del Genil neighborhood, which is great because then there was a whole bunch of little cafe, bar, eatery type places, just a short walk, as well as a couple of grocery stores. So everything we needed was right there, which was
Yeah, so the lodging property had 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, really nicely outfitted kitchen. There was also like an interior patio, so you could have your coffee outside. Super cool spot. Their website is Trails of the Alhambra, which is a pun that we'll explain later, but we'll put the link in the description below. That's where we stayed. We had a list of rides that we wanted to do. We didn't get to do all of them, partly because of the weather, but also we wanted to actually explore Granada. It was our first time.
Right. So we were able to make use of those rental Ritchie bikes that they have, which was great. We took those out on some gravel. The first ride was really quite short in miles, but had plenty of climbing to make up for it. Started with this nice deserty climb, got a good out view of the valley, went down the other side and rode through an olive grove, followed alongside this cute little creek under some trees, popped out at the edge of Sacromonte Park by all the cave homes where they do flamenco shows, kind of cut around by the Alhambra, popped out the other side onto some more kind of backyard single track with great views pointing the other direction, and before we knew it, we were back. It was kind of mind-blowing, all the different, bits of scenery and landscape and environment that we went through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a stretch on that ride where it was really steep, and you actually end up going right by the Alhambra, which was cool to see. We ended up walking. That seemed like the appropriate thing to do, just because there were so many pedestrians. But yeah, it was short, but very, very punchy. There were actually parts where we walked the bikes downhill because it was so steep and loose. But definitely a fun kind of eye-opening ride and a good introduction to the area.
It really was. It's just a nice sense of like, okay, there's so much variety in landscape and kinds of riding out here. So that was great.
And climbing.
And climbing, lots of climbing.
The next ride we did was a little bit longer, and it was out to this reservoir. And it started off on the main highway that went through a couple small towns before it shot off onto a smaller highway. And then it was more or less a steady climb up to the reservoir. We rode it on a Sunday, which we actually wouldn't recommend. It's probably a better ride for the weekday when the traffic is a little bit more chill. But all in all, it actually wasn't too bad. All the drivers were super courteous, and there were just amazing views. It was like a long, kind of steady climb. Again, you pass from sagebrush. After you hit a certain altitude, it turns into pine trees, and then the views really open up, and you can look down the valley, and it was just some awesome riding.
It really was. And again, we rode through Olive Orchard and climbed up from one valley up and over into another valley, similar but different characteristics, just really incredible.
I forget the name of the reservoir we stopped at, but it was looking pretty full, which is a good thing. They've been having a lot of rains recently in Granada. Supposedly it was a lot emptier just a few months ago, and now it's full of water. Like Laura said, you climbed up a lot more into another valley, and then it was just the craziest series of windy switchbacks down through a small town, then back on the main highway back towards Granada. I think it was like 20-ish miles or so with about 2,000 feet of climbing, which doesn't look bad on paper, but most of that 2,000 feet of climbing happened in the first 10 miles, so a little bit skewed. But man, like the descent back into town was was pretty wild.
I'm not ashamed to admit there were some parts that I was walking up at the top of that climb because it did get pretty steep. But when you have those views to look out on, it was not a hardship. And it was a beautiful day when we were out there. So yeah, and then we rolled into town just in time for tapas.
Mm-hmm.
Had a nice tapas lunch at the end of the ride, and yeah, it felt very, very Granada.
That's probably a good segue. We should talk a little bit about food and the tapas culture there. Mm-hmm. You guys have probably heard of tapas. It's like small plates that you get with a drink. And Spain's kind of known for it, but Granada, does it in like a very traditional way. Mm-hmm. So far as when you order a drink, the price of the food is included. So when you get a drink, they'll bring a tapa out, either right away or a couple minutes after. Sometimes you get to choose a tapa, but oftentimes it's what the establishment has. And one fun thing about it is, when you order another drink, you get another tapas. It's different. It's kind of like fighting your way through a video game boss where each stage you get like a different tapa.
We had tapas in a couple of different places, and they're all different. Every place, I think, has their things that they do. So we had everything from papas a la pobre, which is a sort of roasted potato with a fried egg on top. We had a couple of meatballs with some fries. We had empanadas. We had croquettes. So a variety of things. But all in all, they're small. They're meant to be a couple of bites and a little bit of nibbles. But if you go to the right places, they're bigger nibbles than than others.
So in terms of the off the bike stuff, Granada is just full of history, really interesting architecture. It's kind of a mix of Christian and Islamic religious iconography and structures all around you. So you could probably spend an entire week just walking around and exploring.
Yeah.
And some of the highlights are the Albaicin neighborhood.
Like the way that it was described to us is like going to Morocco without going to Morocco. It's the old Arabic neighborhood from, I think it was 1300s or earlier than that. So it's got just twisty, windy, narrow roads. It's sort of built on a hill, so there's a lot of just like hoofing it up and down hills. There's one little street where it's just jam-packed with tea sellers and restaurants and all of the little tchotchkes and rugs and you name it. You get all the way to the top and there's an incredible lookout. They're called miradores in Spanish, and you can get all the way up there. You just have this incredible view of the Alhambra. When we went up there, there were a couple of guys playing flamenco guitar, and then they were joined by a few other people, and it became a whole impromptu concert right there. Really a fascinating part of town to wander around.
One thing to know about the Albaicin neighborhood is that it's steep. There's lots of stairs. So you don't want to bring your Brompton or your bike up there. It's much better to just take the bus in and explore it by foot.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's like no joke, there's a ton of stairs.
It's true. We did find some really fantastic Lebanese food while we were there, and we also stopped at a teteria, which is there's lots of them throughout the neighborhood. A teteria is basically a tea house, and so we got tea, a big pot of green tea, and then a couple of little dessert things, little pistachio Nidos, yes.
The teteria we ended up with, we'll put a link to that in the description below. It's recommended to us by someone on Graham, so thanks for the recommendation. It actually had the most amazing view of like the Alhambra on its patio, so definitely a spot to check out. Another interesting site is the Sacrement.
Right, so it's a big park, big urban park full of the cave homes where the Gitano community lives, and that's really where you're going to go if you want to see a flamenco show.
And lastly, probably the big crown jewel for Granada the city in terms of a place to visit is the Alhambra.
Yeah, the Alhambra is spectacular and definitely worth the visit. It gets super busy, so make sure that you book your tickets far in advance. But yeah, it is the old palace of the Nasri Emir. Absolutely stunning. And then it's just got these just epic gardens that you can walk through. Just the architecture, the way everything, like the perfect lines, the fountains, the ways that they thought about the way that the light would come in and everything. It's just absolutely spectacular. It looks every bit like you would expect a royal palace should look.
One of the interesting things about the Alhambra is like how much design is woven into the architecture. Everything's very geometric, whereas like floral patterns. And part of this was a religious constraint. In Islamic art, it was kind of forbidden to portray human figures. So to decorate things, they went with all the geometries. And this is echoed throughout, even how like water flows throughout the palace and the gardens. It's definitely a place you could spend hours just wandering around. Like Laura mentioned, get your tickets in advance, like weeks or months, if you know that you're going there, because it is kind of the spot and gets super filled up. The Alhambra is also on top of a hill. You could walk up there, but then you're going to have to walk some more once you get up there. So there are bus lines that get you to the entrance.
Yes, and we highly recommend that. So the Alhambra has two entrances. There's a main entrance where theoretically you can buy tickets. Don't buy tickets there. I think they have a will call. There's a coat check, all that sort of thing. The better thing to do, buy your tickets online, print out your QR code, and then you can go in the other entrance, which I believe is the Puerta de Justicia. You can take the bus right there, walk in. It's the closest to the Nasri Palaces, which is the time that you are booking your ticket for. Walk over, get in line, and then you don't have to trek all the way across the whole of the grounds from the main entrance.
So our ticket said 9 a.m. entrance. So that's to enter the Nasrid Palaces, not the main entrance. If you do that and show up to the main entrance at 9, you've got like at least a 15-20 minute walk, and then you might have missed your window to enter the palace. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I believe the bus to that second entrance is the 32.
They are very particular about how much stuff you can take in with you. If it's too big, they will ask you to check it. They did ask me to carry my backpack on the front instead of on my back, probably so I'm not running into things. So just behooves you to not take things if you don't need to take them.
So some fun facts about the Alhambra. Alhambra, California was actually named after, this palace grounds. Apparently, the daughter of the landowner in Los Angeles that was dividing things up was reading tales from the Alhambra at the time and was inspired, and hence the name the city of Alhambra after this place in Granada. Speaking of Tales of the Alhambra, it's a book written by U.S. diplomat Washington Irving, who has been credited in actually kind of saving the palace grounds. Apparently he had visited there and it was in disrepair, but then he told the story of its history and its occupants in the book, which then kind of popularized the place, and it brought a lot more attention and a lot more care to the place.
Yeah, and there's, as you walk through the Nasri Palaces, there is more information about the conservation and that, is sort of unique for that time, that they really tried to preserve it as it was instead of tweaking it as they might like to see it at the turn of the century when they were starting all that work.
So we spent a little bit less than a week there, but as much time as that was, there was still a lot to do. There were a ton of rides that we wanted to do. One of them was taking a bus with the Brompton up to the trailhead where Duke had built this trail to go to his hotel that he built. But now it's a walkable and bikeable trail that goes right into the mountains along a beautiful river. And supposedly there are all these little stops where you can get tapas along the way. So next time we go back, that's probably going to be the first ride or tapa experience that we do.
Absolutely. We kind of got a glimpse at the area when we were coming back from that bigger loop that we rode. Looked stunning. And supposedly they have a pastry that they make back there that's special to the area. So yeah, definitely at the top of the list when we go back. There's also lots of other great riding. When we went to the bike shop, they talked about how there's lots of secondary roads. You could ride to the coast because it's surprisingly not that far. You can go kind of south out of town and get into some more like flattish land. And then there is the tallest road that you can bike on in Europe. Something like that. So lots of biking possibilities of all sorts of different stripes.
So one of the other fun things to do and check out that's not the Alhambra is a Bici Estacion. It's a cool local bike shop. They actually sell Brompton, so if you do a Brompton and train trip out there and need some help with your Brompton, they can help you out. They also have a whole fleet of gravel bikes, road bikes, mountain bikes, e-mountain bikes. If you want to do a tour, you can rent racks and panniers and even bike packing bags. So for such a small shop in like a historic neighborhood, they're like fully equipped.
Yeah, and super nice people too. Pointed us to a lot of different interesting things, and they can point out all sorts of great riding.
So I don't know, do you think you'd want to go back?
Absolutely. I think I need some more of those tapas.
In terms of like the best time to go, we went in late November, which is just on the cusp of being a little too cold.
Yeah, I think if we had had time on our schedule to go in early November, that might have been a little bit better. I did appreciate that it wasn't hot, that it was a little bit on the cooler side, but it also, walking around the Alhambra in the morning
It's crispy.
was cold, actually. So, yeah, I think probably October, early November would be good, and probably spring, I'm guessing, would probably be good as well. They do get winter, and they do get the kind of hot summer that southern Spain is known for. So I think in terms of riding, shoulder season is going to be the sweet spot. I thought it was really interesting to go to Granada because it is so different from Girona. Just a really interesting mix of cultures, of environments, both natural and built, and just really, I don't know, a neat place to walk around, bike around, explore. What did you think? Did you like it?
Yeah, I love the architecture. I was kind of missing my art supplies just because it's such a beautiful city. So many things to take pictures of and create art around. Very inspiring location.
All of that is to say, I guess, that we'll be back at some point, right? And hopefully you guys will have a chance to go visit as well.
So that's it for a wrap up of our Granada trip. If you guys have any other questions, leave those in the comments below. We'll put all the links to the things we talked about in the description. And thanks to the folks over at the Trails of the Alhambra for hosting us. Beautiful little casita. Awesome that they've got Ritchie bikes to rent. Also really knowledgeable about rides in the area, and they'll point you in the right direction. As always, everybody, keep the supple side down.